Okay, so this is the book of Ruth, chapter 3 and 4. Good. So today we don't have any discussion because there was no reading assignment. So we'll go straight into the text. And today we're going to cover two things. Two main titles are The Seduction of Boaz and The Renewal of the Cosmos. So that's the titles, the two things we'll do. And again, today will be, this book for me is when it comes to gender relations, this is such an amazing book, right? As much as the book of Genesis with Adam and Eve showed us the dysfunction of gender relations, here we really have a kind of healing text, right? This is a text which in a way repairs the breach that was opened between man and woman in the book of Genesis, right? So this is there is so much in this book to learn about gender relations, about femininity, about masculinity. So it's a really great book. So today we're going to go into, again, I'm going to teach this book with the perspective of gender. And it's interesting because this book, when I studied the commentaries for it, right, I read almost like everything that was written on this book that was, relevant. And they all emphasize the political aspect of the book, right? They show, oh, look, this is the welcoming of the stranger. Ruth is a foreigner. This is a text which is supposed to teach the Hebrews to be open to foreigners, right? This was one of the tenets of the mother's house, right? That Ruth is a kind of, she's a presence within the community of Israel, which is foreign. And this book is all about how when you welcome the stranger, you revitalize the community. So this is the main way that this book has been taught and looked at. And it's definitely one of the main lessons of the book, right? That the welcoming. So there is a very deep political lesson here, definitely, which I don't want to overlook, even though I'm going to go in a different direction. There's definitely a powerful political lesson that when you welcome the stranger, it doesn't impoverish you, but rather revitalizes the community, right? And there's so much to be learned here with regards to our immigration policies, for example, right? When we think of immigration, we usually think, oh, immigration, it will deplete our resources, it will take away our identity. We have all kinds of objections, right, to welcoming in foreign elements into our country. And what this text is saying is, no, your identity will be strengthened, right? We see this especially at the end when Ruth, we see she is part of this genealogy that leads to King David, right? So in a way, she has strengthened the Jewish identity. And not only that, we will see that her presence will profoundly revitalize the community, revitalize Boaz, revitalize Naomi. We're going to talk about all of these revitalizations at the end, right? So definitely there is some interesting lessons to be learned in terms of political lessons to be learned from this book. And this is usually what most people have written on. One of the best commentaries on this book, if you start to really like it, is the one by Tamara Eskenazi. And she has simply, I think I have it here, it's just called, I'm looking, the JPS Bible commentary. And this is one of the best commentaries, right? The JPS Bible commentary on Ruth, right? It's a series, right? JPS is the Jewish Publication Society, right? So she wrote in one of the best commentaries. It's exhaustive. You don't have to read anything else if you read that commentary. And she really emphasizes the political aspect, and one of the main things that I loved from her is that she says that this book was written in reaction to the two other biblical books called Ezra and Nehemiah. So I'll say a few words about that, and then I'll get into my own interpretation of the book. But for those of you who are familiar, let me tell you a little bit about Ezra and Nehemiah, these two books in the Hebrew Bible, against which the book of Ruth was written, right? So Ezra and Nehemiah, if you remember, this is when if you know a little bit about Jewish history, we know by now they were in Egypt, they arrived in the land of Israel, they had judges and kings, and then they were sent into exile in Babylon, right? Meaning the Babylonians conquered them, brought them into exile, and then eventually they came back and they rebuilt the temple, they rebuilt everything, the wall, the land, everything. And at that moment, as they were rebuilding under the tutelage of Ezra and Nehemiah, these were two very prominent leaders who were in charge of rebuilding the temple, rebuilding the wall, rebuilding the city, and rebuilding Jerusalem. They wanted to rebuild a pure race, right? They wanted Israel to be completely free of any outside influences. And they were such purists that they actually asked that every man divorce his wife if his wife was not a Hebrew. And it was interesting because everybody was assembled when they said this, and the women complained. The women, it's interesting because the women complained with a loud voice, it says in the text. And so the man, right, said, listen, let's not have it that all of us divorce, but let's have the elders divorce their pagan wives, right? So they kind of watered it down a bit. But so this was the context, that right after the exile, they really wanted to purify the religion, purify the race, right? And they wanted to get rid of all foreign elements. And she believes, so Tamara Eskenazi believes, that the book of Ruth was written in reaction to this perspective, saying, if you go into this kind of purist approach to religion or to nation building, right, you're going to go into decay, right? You need to be constantly open to foreign influences to stay dynamic. This is the same lesson as the Tower of Babel, right? Babel wanted to stay among themselves. They didn't want to have any foreign influence, right? So, and then we see they degenerate, right? So the book of Ruth is there to remind us that for any type of community to remain dynamic and vital, we need to be permeable to outside influences. And this works for a family setting, individually, and also on the level of the nation, right? So this is in general, just to give you some ideas of how the book is really read in general. But here what I want to offer you is more of a gender relations reading, more looking into the wisdom of relationships. What can we learn in this book about womanhood, manhood, relationship between the two? What is some of the wisdom, right, that we can get from this book? The reason that the political was emphasized in the reading so far is that men have been reading the book who are concerned with political issues, right? We need more women to read the book to be like, what can I learn here as a woman, right? In my relationships, what can I get from this book? So we will go into what Williams loved. I don't know if Williams is here already. Where is Williams? Not yet. But Williams is enjoying the self-help aspect of our books. And so I'm, again, treating this book as a self-help. So today, The Seduction of Boaz. And what I want to look at here specifically is how she engages with him. Clearly, it's a success story, right? She's able to bring him around to her perspective. And my question, of course, is how does she do it, right? This is so important because still today, in gender relations, we have a deep problem of communication, right? If you look around, you see two types of couples. You have the couple where there's no communication and everything's kind of going well, but they live in separate worlds. And you have the couple fighting all the time, right? And we as women also, I think, we are a little bit lost as to how to communicate. Why? Because we saw our mothers or grandmothers who did not communicate and who remained silent and who just took it. Whatever was going on, they would just take it. And then we, in growing up in the continuity of feminism and, you know, this kind of awakening of feminine consciousness, we now want to say what we think. And we want to say it straight up, right? We just want to be honest, direct, and say things as they are. And this is backfiring. It's not working, right? Many of us are saying to their faces things to the men in our lives, and they're not listening, or they're leaving, or we're leaving, right? So we are either too silent, this is the past, or now maybe not too vocal. You cannot be too vocal, but we are not finding the way to speak to the men in our lives, which actually has an impact, right? I mean, some of us, I'm sure some of you have it down and you have amazing romantic relationships, right? Or maybe you know people like that. But in general, we are struggling nowadays. I think a lot of us, especially as women, we don't want to be silent. We want to speak, but when we speak, it's not coming across, right? The men in our lives are not listening, or they're ignoring us, or they're, screaming back at us, right? And so the question is, it's good to be vocal, but how do we become vocal in a way that we are heard? That is my obsession. That's what I want to figure out, right? Most of us women come from a lineage of silence. We have not seen our mothers express anything to our fathers. Our mothers, in a way, have been silent, or if they have spoken, it is in a very aggressive way. And so we have not learned as women, I believe, to communicate in a way that we can be received by the men in our lives. This is the dilemma that I have as I'm entering the book of Ruth and trying to find wisdom. Olivera, go ahead.
I always have a question of how, because the way you put it, it feels almost like it lays too much. It depends solely on how the woman is speaking. But if on the other end there is no receptive ear, then doesn't matter how you speak. And I think the communication is always two people. And then I find the way that you post, you put too much responsibility on one end. So. But I may be wrong.
You're in luck, Olivera. I have taken your advice from the last class, and I am now going to offer a more balanced approach where both have a role to play. We will see. Certainly we will explore the part of Ruth, but I'm going to talk about also the part of Boaz, right? So you're in luck, especially with Ruth. It's a very balanced stories. So we are learning in the book of Ruth how to be women, but we also learning how to be men, right? If we're men, obviously, right? So definitely it is, you're in luck in this particular story. Both have a role to play, and I'm going to highlight both, right? But I'm going to focus first on the woman, if you'll forgive me. And then, yes, definitely, we will go into the man, and this will be in the last section of this, right before the renewal of the cosmos. I will talk about Boaz. So definitely we will talk about both. Yeah, thank you, Olivera, because it's true. We do need, the man also needs to learn to listen. And we will see actually Boaz in a way how he reacts to Ruth and what men can learn from that, right? So yes, you're in luck today. All right, let's get into the seduction of Boaz. We're going to start with Ruth. So remember, here's the question, right? The question is this. You're in a relationship. You're a man or woman, whatever, right? Crisis hits. Communication is necessary, right? There's something needs to be said, right? And my issue is, right, that we as women have learned, and this is very good. This is part of the benefits of feminism, right? I'm very critical of feminism, but this part I'm in, right? The part that feminism has down is that women need to speak. Women need to, their voice needs to be heard. And this part I'm down, right? This is one of the main contributions of feminism, is to create a platform and teach women to speak and to be vocal about what they're thinking, what they're desiring, what their whole world, right? But here's the failure of feminism, which I'm hoping this book will remedy. We do not know how to speak in a way that we can be understood, right? So when you see, yes, if you speak in a certain way, the man cannot listen. We have to learn to modulate the way we speak so they can listen. Obviously, then they have to understand the value of listening, right? So, but definitely, and by the way, the same is true for the man, right? There are ways that a man needs to learn to speak to a woman, and especially when it comes to expressing love, right? He has to learn her language, right? He has to learn that flowers matter, chocolates matter, foreplay matters, right? Communication matters, helping, right? These are, men have to learn also how to express their love in a language that we understand. So it's not just us has to learn the language of men, but But that's another story, of course, what language the man needs to learn. But definitely we have to learn each other's language. We have to learn to speak in a way that we understand. We are two worlds, right? Let's stop thinking that the man and the woman are in the same world. It's not true. Man is over here on this planet, woman is over here on that planet. And if we don't start to learn the planetary language of the other, it's not going to happen, right? So here Ruth is very good at speaking the language that the man understands. And we see that this because Boaz responds very well to her, right? And Boaz, of course, will learn about the listening. As far as the man talking, we have to use another text. How they can learn to speak their love to us. That's a whole other story. Okay, so I'm going to look at 3 expressions in our chapter 3. I'm going to look at, where is it? Yes, the expression bathe, anoint, dress. So this will be the outline for this first section. Bathe, anoint, dress. This is a very important expression. The second thing we'll talk about is when she tells him, spread your wings, for you are a redeemer. We'll look at that. And then the last one is what Boaz says, right? I will do for you all that you ask. Is that is a music to a woman's ears, right? I will do for you all that you ask. So this reaction is so beautiful, right? That I want to know how I can elicit this reaction from the men that I love, right? This is how I'm getting in the text. I'm looking at the reaction of Boaz. Wow, all that you ask of me, I will do. I'm like, what did she do to elicit such a response? That's my question here, right? Good. Okay, so first of all, the expression bathe, anoint, dress. This is very typical in the ancient Near Eastern literature. When a woman bathes and anoints and dresses, this is also a part of the Sumerian literature that I'm referring to all the time, right? This is an indication that she's about to have a sexual encounter, right? This is typical expression. We have the same expression with, again, I'm talking about Inanna, right? Since this is the point of reference. Inanna, who is about to have her first encounter with her lover Dumutzi, she bathes, she anoints, and she dresses, or her mother actually tells her, bathe, anoint, dress, just like Noemi, bathe, anoint, dress. So it's the mother usually who pushes the daughter into a sexual relationship. And after that, they have their first night together, right? So when you see this expression throughout ancient Near Eastern literature, you know this is a preparation for a sexual encounter. Now, I see a question in the chat. So Butterfield, would you like to say your question out loud?
Sure. Sorry, my computer crashed, and so I'm trying to switch between my phone and my laptop right now.
No worries.
But
no worries.
Yeah, I guess I was just hoping to hear a little bit more on what you were saying about how it's on the women to make men understand, because I think that that's a kind of a loaded thing to say. And so I was just wondering if that's just kind of your interpretation as you have gone through your studies and your, just opinions and interpretations, or if there was something out of this text that actually said that, just because I didn't really see anything even resembling this this discussion in the reading that we did.
Okay. Yes. So in general, first of all, global look in the Bible and then this text, right? In general, in the Bible, the woman has incredible power of persuasion, to persuade, right? Persuade, we say that in English? Is that a word? Persuade? To persuade? That sounds foreign. You guys understanding me? Okay. Good. Right. So we see several instances where the woman is able to have an impact on the man and change the course of this man by speaking, right? And so when you look through the Hebrew Bible, the women are very vocal, actually, right? But they have a way of speaking which actually stops the men in their tracks. And this is over and over again. And so I'm very curious. I'm studying this myself because I'm like, okay, first of all, they're vocal. I love that. That's very feminist. That's very emancipated. But they're vocal, not just sitting there stamping their feet saying, I want rights, right? Which of course is legitimate. There's a place for that. I'm not against it, right? But they are vocal in a way that can stop the men in their tracks, meaning their vocalness has also a redemptive quality towards the man. I'll give you some examples in a second. I'm just making the point clear, right? So in general, we have many, many examples where the woman speaks. Of course, the woman can speak for herself and so forth, but the examples, the most examples we have in the Hebrew Bible is the woman is speaking for the sake of the man to stop him from taking a course which is dangerous to him. And so we see over and over again in the stories of the Hebrew Bible that the woman with her voice has the power to steer the man away from danger. I'll give you first the most powerful example is the story of Abigail and David, if you remember. Abigail was, or Abigail in English, she was a very wealthy woman. Her husband was very wealthy, and David was at the time kind of just an outlaw. And he was protecting, his job as an outlaw was kind of to protect different estates, and he would get paid like that, right? He would protect them against invaders and so forth. So he had been protecting this estate, and when he was done, he wanted his pay. And the landlord was like, "Who's this? I don't know this guy." And he kind of, brushed him off. And so he was so angry, he was going to come and conquer the estate and destroy everybody there. And Abigail heard this, and she got up and she, got a bunch of gifts together, food, and went up and she spoke to him. And it's, again, she stops him in his tracks. She has a way of speaking where he is deeply moved and he changes his course. The second example, Queen Esther. Her king, her husband, the king is about to destroy her people. And she has to find a way to speak so that she can be heard. And she proceeds very similar to Ruth through seduction, through the channels of seduction, right? But in the end, she speaks and he stops in his tracks, right? So over and over again, we see in the Hebrew Bible that the woman's voice has a strong redemptive quality when it is addressed to the man. We talked about Ezer Kenegdo in Genesis 2. This is the tool, how the woman can be Ezer Kenegdo through her voice, right? So, and then here with Ruth, of course, we have to study the text before you can see it, but she will also, her voice will also shift the course of this man, and we'll see how. Does this begin to open up the dimension I'm trying to get to, Butterfield?
Yeah, I mean, I remembered some of these examples that you gave, but I guess more specifically, I was wondering, you said that it is important for women to make their voices heard, but then you said that women also need to make it so that men can understand what they're saying. And I guess that's where I was a little bit lost, because it seems like that's transferring like the burden of understanding onto the women, instead of just allowing them to express their voice. There's then like an additional responsibility to make it comfortable or digestible for the men.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that's putting, I mean, of course, this is a weight that she has to learn to speak in a certain way. But of course, the man also has the responsibility to develop an ear to the woman, right? If the man does not develop an ear to the woman, he cannot even hear, right? Abigail's husband, Nabal, did not have such an ear, and so he dies. Right? David has an ear. So it's not enough for the woman to learn to speak. You can be an extremely articulate speaker and the man still goes and right? So the burden is on both. She needs to modulate her voice, but he needs to modulate his hearing, and that's what we'll be talking about. And of course, the opposite is true, right? The man also can speak and the woman can listen. But in the Hebrew Bible, the emphasis is usually the woman speaks, the man listens. Why? Because the woman represents wisdom in the Hebrew Bible, right? This is who we are. We are, in a way, according to the Hebrew Bible, the woman is the embodiment of wisdom. The man is the embodiment of the law. That's his task, right? He will speak laws, but we will speak wisdom. And this is why if the man does not hear the woman, he will make laws, but the laws will not be wise. Does that make sense? So yes, it puts a whole weight on the woman, but this is, according to the Bible, our calling as women is to be embodiment of wisdom. And so yes, we need to speak and we need to speak well, but if the man does not know to listen, he will be a fool. Right? The Bible says this. So do you see a little bit? It both have a responsibility, but the task of speaking is ours. Why? Because we are the embodiment of wisdom. Does that make sense, Butterfield? At least in the Hebrew Bible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes, you good? Any other clarification or? Okay, now there's a couple. Yes. No? Okay. There's a
No,
couple of
sorry.
responses. No worries. There's a couple of responses to you. So Rudolph and Edmonds, go ahead.
I think Hallie is just going along with you right now, and I don't feel you're quite happy with the answer yet. What I saw in your initial question to Professor Decan was the fact that, listen, why is it my responsibility to make a man understand what I want him to do or what I want him to understand? Why should we women do something that is a natural thing for a man to wrap his head around? So let me ask you the question the other way around. Is the reason for you asking the fact that you feel that men in general, and say it to me, I'm a man, that I am not capable of understanding you?
I guess I just don't know that I mean, obviously, when we're talking about conversations between people, it's just going to depend on the people, but I don't know that and again, obviously men and women have many differences, but I think it is a little bit alienating to say that I can't even say something to a man without him understanding me, for both the man and the woman. I don't know why a man wouldn't be able to just understand what I'm saying. I don't know why I don't know why I have to change my words, change how I speak to a man for him to understand me as a woman. And I don't quite understand why a man wouldn't just be able to hear me as he would anyone else.
And that's exactly what I heard from you. That is the motivation of your question. I get that. Now, my question back to you is, does that happen all the time? Or do you think this is only mentioned in the context of this biblical story?
I don't think that it naturally occurs. I think that there are definitely situations which are modern situations which are maybe politically or socially charged where groups of people choose to misunderstand each other, but I don't think that there's some natural inclination that men can't understand women and women can't speak to men. And so I do think that that's why I was kind of wondering about this, because it seems like it's possibly more rooted in the text that we're reading, but I also didn't see this explicit discussion occur. So that's why
Excellent.
I heard that.
Good. That's a legitimate question, Butterfield, because and you will see as we talk about how Ruth talks to him, you will see immediately what we women sometimes lack when we're talking and why the men we're talking to don't understand us. So you'll have to wait just a little bit, but yes, I will answer that question for sure. Edmonds, go ahead.
So I guess one question I have is just based on what we were talking about a while back in Greek philosophy, the sort of heat, that women are, hot and, change their emotions rapidly and all of that. Why is it that this Bible seems, or this, this story seems to be, countering that even without having to interpret it differently, right? Sometimes we have to interpret these stories so that they conform to the mother's house interpretation because of that, preconception from Greek philosophy. Why is it that this is different?
I'm not following exactly your question with regards to Greek philosophy. Are you saying, I'm not quite.
So you said that a while back, correct me if I'm wrong, but that typically the Bible is read through this sort of Greek lens that puts women as more sort of mercurial, subject to, changing their opinion. But now we're talking about women as being sort of this sense of wisdom. So I'm just wondering about that distinction there.
So yes, I was talking about the Greek interpretation only when it came to the story of Eve. They distort the story because they're seeing women from distorted lens as corrupt. So they make Eve corrupt, and in the whole way we interpreted it, hopefully was to show that she was on the contrary, right?
So that's not pervasive throughout the entire Bible. That in Greek interpretation.
And the Greek interpretation is not in the Bible. It's the church fathers who come and do this, right? So it's in the writings of the church fathers. It's in the writings of the rabbi, but you don't have this Greek view in the Bible at all. In the biblical text. Unlike the Greek, it's so opposite. I love the way you contrast them, because in the Greek, it's the man who is wise and rational, right? Because he is leaning towards heaven. But in the Hebrew text, the woman who is wisdom, right? And the man is in charge of the law, right? They both have two specific tasks. The man makes the law, and you see that the way that the men are engaged with all the commandments in the Hebrew tradition. This is the whole task of man, is to follow the commandments. for the woman, she looks at this and she's like, I don't see how this connects to me, right? Many of us women are alienated with all these commandments. What is this? I don't need this. Why? Because we have a different task, right? Which is wisdom. So, and we haven't explored that. So no, in the Hebrew Bible, the Greeks are inexistent, except in Paul, right? Much later. And here you do really have a very positive view of the woman as the seat of wisdom, in contrast to the Greek. Yeah, very nice. Excellent.
Thank you.
Okay, so we do need to trudge forward so you can get, so Butterfield can have her answer. And but first I want to talk about a little bit this moment, interesting moment of seduction, right? So as I was saying, right, bathe, anoint, dress, this is typical expression found throughout Near Eastern literature. When you see this, you know it's a preparation for a sexual encounter. So basically what Naomi is telling her is prepare to have sex with this guy, right? So that you can, in a way, move him to make a decision which will be positive for you. Right. So, and by the way, just to Rudolph, right, this is the one moment where Naomi is emerging from her despair and thinking of Ruth, right, saying, I will need to make a home for you, right? So it is really about Ruth. You're right. Although Naomi will benefit, obviously, right? So, okay, so she does it. She follows. And this is where we think, oh my God, she's so passive, right? Until we get to the moment, right? So she gets there. And the expression now, we can finally clarify this expression, to uncover the feet. The Hebrews are very subtle. What this actually means is to uncover the genitals. So get him naked, she's telling him. Get him naked when he is drunk. This is the worst. It's a kind of date rape, right? That she's suggesting to this woman. She's like, go there when he's drunk, get him naked, lie down before him and see what happens, basically, right? So there's definitely connotation of sexual advance, seduction, right? And you have, if you want some references to the expression uncover the feet as having a sexual connotation, you can go to Deuteronomy 28, verse 57, or you can go to Ezekiel 16, verse 25. These are other texts in the Hebrew Bible where you have the same expression with a sexual connotation, right? So, okay, so basically what we're seeing here is a woman using her seductive powers to gain leverage over the man, right? And this is the part where most of us in the class are uncomfortable, right? I mean, some of us, there's different levels of discomfort, right? First level of discomfort, wait a second, what is this premarital sex scene going on here? That's the first level. Second level of discomfort that I felt in some of you is, oh, so now she's going to use her power of seduction to kind of manipulate the man into marrying her, right? So we are not seeing, especially in a Western perspective, coming from a Puritan background, right? We are not happy with what is happening here in the text, right? But what I want to do, and we are in general, right, as a Western society, especially if we're coming from a religious Western perspective, we are very cautious when it comes to seduction. The seduction has a bad rep in religious circles, whether it's Islam, Judaism, or Christianity. You will see universally seduction is seen as something negative, as something which women should not engage in, right? So let me talk about that a little bit. And then we're going to see what is the type of seduction that Ruth is using, and is this a path that we can follow? Right? So, but first of all, let's talk about seduction in religious circles, right? There is really, really an attempt to, and it's interesting, I've always been perplexed why. Maybe you guys can help me, right? But I'm noticing in all three monotheisms, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, there's really a powerful attempt to tamper the woman's seductive powers, right? So whether it's making her dress in a way that she's covered from head to toe, or banning jewelry, or telling her don't dance, right? Or no singing. In the Jewish tradition, right, women can't sing. In Christian traditions, she cannot dance. In certain Christian traditions, no jewelry. In Jewish and Christian tradition, cover up, right? So I am perplexed, right? So definitely, or maybe you can answer me. I'm wondering why, if you can help me investigate, why do you think seduction, or the seductive power of the woman, has been for so long closeted by these three world traditions. I'm curious if you can help me figure out this more deeply. I have some idea why, but I'm curious what you guys have to say. Why have we been so distrustful of the woman's body, of her power to seduce with her body, right? Okay, let's see, Christodoulou and then Olivera, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I would push back a little bit on the idea that at least like this kind of like dress and singing and dancing are like a way to control women's like seductive powers. Like I think it's more about having the option to turn it on and off, right? It's like you cover in public because you choose who you are uncovered in front of. Like not everyone gets the privilege of seeing you, you know.
Good, that's
like,
a great answer. Good.
In the you know, as you know, like in the Near East, before the monotheistic religions, the slaves were uncovered everywhere and they were seen by all.
And they were also praised, right? By being uncovered is saying I'm public property, right? So when you cover, right, it's a way of saying no, I belong to someone, don't touch me. So I like that. Very nice, Christodoulou. Okay, so it's not okay. So I misread it. It's clearly not. It's about the public display of that, but privately, of course. And we see this actually, just to go in your direction. In Islam, at least, I'm familiar with an amazing erotic text that was written for men in the 16th century. And I suggest all of you men, please read it. It's called The Perfumed Garden. Already the title is amazing. The Perfumed Garden. It's a treatise on sexuality, which is extremely progressive, right? This is kind of like the equivalent of the Kama Sutra, but for the Muslim traditions. And you can see their enormous sensuality, right? So sensuality was definitely not repressed in the Muslim tradition, maybe only publicly, so that privately you could really. So, okay, I love that. That's a great answer. Thank you, Christodoulou, for nuancing my perspective and explaining the covering part. That's very interesting. Olivera, what do you have to add?
I think my answer is very expected, but I find that it's a little bit of like the control. So if the woman feels so comfortable that she can steer the situation this way or that way, you know, so maybe I think to limit that, to limit the power of women to take the situations in a direction or another, because like as the world evolved since then to now, we see that women didn't have much voice, and I think and much saying on most of the things, and then would be like a one weapon that could be used, but to repress that would also to take away this power.
Right, very good. Right, in the Hebrew Bible, this power is recognized and is at work, right? We see this in the book of Ruth, the book of Esther. So the seductive power of women is in a way celebrated, enshrined, right, in these stories. But in the Western world, maybe there is this fear, right, of the impact of this power. And so there is the desire to keep the woman in her place in a way, and following in the Greek, right, idea that the woman needs to be controlled and submitted, or, you know, taught what to do. So the idea of the woman having power over the man is just repulsive to the Greek mind, right? And we Westerners are the heirs of this Greek mindset. So whereas in the Hebrew tradition, the woman is given the power, right, through the art of seduction and through the power of her speech, right? So so it's interesting contrast, right? And yes, a very good Christodoulou, that in the Muslim tradition is not the same thing, because what I'm talking about is the way that the Greeks have influenced and infiltrated Christianity, especially, and made it impossible for a woman to inhabit her body, right? So this is a problem in many, many Christian circles, where women do not know their own power, right? They are cut off from their own bodies from the start. And this is a reality, to the point that women, even when they get married, don't even know how to find pleasure and so forth, right? There is a real problem here, right? So here, what I'm loving with this text is that this is a woman who fully inhabits her body, who knows her power, and is able to change the course of her life through the use of that voice, right? Okay, great. Let's see, there was one. Rudolph, go ahead.
So to Larissa's and your point, which I totally agree with, There is another little thing called testosterone in a man's body that's much more voluminous than in a woman's system. And that testosterone brings men generally to put their primeval instinct for sex out much more, in combination with a male possessive nature, the hunter, the aggressor, the fighter, the soldier, the warrior. It's nothing but primitive behavior that is kind of wrapped up under the cloak of patriarchal domination over women in the past. And a man's mind, in comparison to a woman's mind, is very feeble, very naive, very easily can very easily influence a man's mind. The point I'm trying to make here is that this is nothing else but a product of patriarchism, where men tried to paint a woman in a certain light, and restrict her capabilities. I don't think you can translate it into today's times any longer. And earlier on, you said, you know, we kind of want to look into why we women don't know how to speak. I think you do, and I think we're finally on a way to communicate, and we're finally, we meaning we men, we're finally listening to what the other sex is saying. It can't be such an absolute statement that men and women don't live in the same world. I agree that there is a huge disconnect, but we're inching our ways together. I'm grateful for having to live with 3 women who happen to be my family, and they have taught me that nothing I say is absolute. Nothing I utter, nothing I conclude, nothing I want is just something that I get. Everything has to be looked at, everything is debated, everything is discussed, and everything is either agreed or disagreed to. That's in my family. Now, I'm the kind of guy who supports this. It's not an easy life. I'm here to tell you that I have to often put my own ego in the pocket and say, let me just listen here a little bit. Maybe there's a point. I don't quite get it yet, but they're also adamant about it. There's got to be some truth to what they're saying.
Good. Yes, I agree. We're making progress, but I have to say you are specifically enlightened household, right? Which is not yet the case as I mean, I would say that 70% of households in the world are not where your household is, right? So this is a very rare, that what you're still, it's still quite rare. I mean, not very, you have more and more people, more and more couples, right, are reaching this state of awakening. But I'm talking to those who haven't reached it yet. I'm talking for that, right? So obviously, especially in this class, I can see that the men in this class, the women in this class are pretty awakened, right? But if you look outside of the academic setting, and so these stories can be inspiring, not just to academics, right? These stories are for all of us. And I sometimes I have this fantasy, right, that these stories are taught, you know, in the villages, in the different neighborhoods, so women can be empowered by these beautiful examples, right? This is like my fantasy. So yes, but you're right, we're getting there, but there's still a lot of work to do. And this is where we are today. Okay, so so going back to the seduction, right? I guess my point is, which you can write down if you want to write down anything, that seduction has had a bad reputation, and especially, and I'm going to focus especially in Christian circles, right, where I have really heard testimonies and read testimonies about women who very often are not at home in their own bodies, have been cut off from their bodies because of the way that the religion is taught, telling them, you know, do not use that power, right? And so I'm just talking, I cannot speak so much for Jewish or Islam because I'm not, you know, a citizen of those right communities, but so for sure in America, I'm looking at American Christianity, there is an issue. And women, in a way, have lost that power. And perhaps I am blaming it on the Greek lineage, which has wanted the man to have the only position of power, right? The woman's voice. So I'm looking here, and I'm liking this story for that reason, because I'm seeing here a woman who is able to have leverage, who is able to move the man through this seductive quality. Now, I want to talk, however, of two kinds of seduction, right? Because you have good seduction, bad seduction. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Because yes, you have so the bad reputation of seduction does have a point. That's my point, right? So let's look a little bit at seduction in a way that is problematic, and then see how Ruth is seducing in a way that is not problematic, and how we can follow in her footsteps, right? So seduction, typically the bad type, in general, when seduction is used in this bad way, it is in order to exercise control, right? So I've read several books on seduction that we are writing nowadays. There's a famous Art of Seduction that's written by a man, actually. And I think it's a guide for men, right? How to how to get any woman to, fall at their feet. And you have several similar books for women. I've got so many titles in my head right now, right? How to, I don't know, the titles are not coming, but we have titles too, where how we can manipulate the men to fall in love with us, or how we can manipulate them to marry us. Oh, here's a good one. That's a classic called The Rules. It's a lot of good advice, but at the same time, the main thrust of the book is how we can control the situation to our advantage, right? So seduction, in a way, has become a way to exercise power over the other. And this is where there's a problem. Not only that, but it is in a way disempowering to the other. The seduction, often when it is a woman doing it to a man, it plays on the man's weakness, right? And takes away his power, right? So there is clear good. I mean, the church fathers were not completely wrong to despise seduction, because there is really, it is an act of power over another subject, right? You are almost magically, what's the word? Enchanting them, right? And playing on their weaknesses so you can get them, twirled around your little finger. And we women are smiling because all of us inside of us, we know, and we want this, right? So, of course, who doesn't want to have power? We are daughters of Eve, after all, right? So definitely there is this side where seduction, and then we know all these stories of men who followed after a woman, and then their lives, were completely destroyed, right? I'm thinking just biblically, you can look at the story of Samson and Delilah, right? This is the classic story of seduction. She seduces this very prominent judge, right? He was a judge in Israel. We forget that sometimes, that he was a ruler. And she seduces him to the point that he loses all of his strength, right? There's the famous story where she cuts his hair. And he used to be a very strong man, very powerful, and she brings him into her bedroom, right? She calms him down, and while he's sleeping, she cuts his hair. And then he awakens and he has lost all his power. This is almost a myth, right? Mythical, archetypal story, right? Of how a woman can completely not castrate, but destroy a man, right? Through the act of seduction, right? So the church fathers are not entirely wrong, right? To see seduction in a dark light, because yes, we women, I have to say, have used this power often, very often, to control the man, and we end up destroying the man. Yes, it's a fact, we do that. Okay, so yes, so that's why, in a way, seduction is seen, right? Let's not do that. Women shouldn't do that. Men shouldn't even look at that, and we've put it in the closet, right? But I want to reawaken it, but not in that way, right? And so the book of Ruth, I feel, is giving us a different path of seduction, and that's what I want to look at right now. So I want to make three distinctions between the seduction I just mentioned, Samson and Delilah, and Ruth and Boaz, right? So I'm going to look at three different points, and I'm going to start with the seduction of Samson and Delilah, and I'm going to look at three things. I'll just say them. I'm not going to write them down. I'll just list them really quick. Very often when a woman is I will talk about dark seduction and luminous seduction, right? We will look at the dark side of seduction, the shadow side of seduction, and the glorious side of seduction, right? So very often when a woman is seducing a man and it is not in the right path for either of them, if there is the seduction of the woman, there's two things. It's coming from a place of desperation. We have to have this man, and so we will do whatever it takes to get that man attached to us. And so it's coming very often, right? The shadow seduction, right? When seduction is taking place in its dark form, it is often stemming from a woman's desperation. She is desperate and she has to get this man, so seduction becomes a way to control, and she's playing on his weaknesses so she can get him, right? Second thing, it has a fixed agenda, right? The woman is seeking to keep this guy, right? So she will do what it takes to keep this guy, right? And finally, usually this type of seduction is pretty aggressive, right? It's very in your face. It's going to be, pretty obvious what's happening, right? Now, what Ruth is doing is very different. First of all, it's coming from a different place, right? So she is seducing him from a place of love rather than a place of desperation. She's not desperate. She's doing this for Naomi. She's doing this with the goal of marriage. She's doing this with, right, she's seeking, she has already, we know that she is already a warrior woman, that she's already somebody who is aligned with love. So her seduction coming from a place of love, and this makes the whole difference, right? Because she can therefore orient the man in a direction which is on the trajectory of love rather than the trajectory of desperation. And finally, this is the key. Her seduction is open-ended, right? So in other words, she's gonna leave a lot of leverage for the man. It's going to be, we're going to see how she does that, right? So what I'm going to suggest is that here in her seductive way, in as much as her seduction is coming from a place of love, it will steer the man in a direction which is life-giving and not death-giving, right? The problem when seduction comes from a place of desperation, it leads, right, to another place of desperation, right? So the key here for Ruth, and I think for every woman in the room, is to realize to use our power coming from a place of love and not from a place of desperation. When it comes from a place of love, you are therefore going to be turning the man in a direction which is life-giving rather than death-giving, right? So in that sense, I'm seeing a difference between the seduction of Ruth. The motive of the seduction is different. It's not to have for herself, it's not to grasp, it's to allow, is to create the space for something new, right? Okay, I see a couple hands. So Rudolph and Christodoulou, go ahead.
You know, we said something similar yesterday, saying that Ruth is coming from a place of love, and I don't really have an issue with the argument. What I have an issue with is that there is a secondary story of Naomi here, who is kind of pimping her daughter-in-law out to this guy.
Yes.
For lack of better term, you know, it's Ruth who is recognizing the whole situation and saying, okay, so this is not so bad because, you know, let me slip into bed with this guy. I'm going to walk away with, you know, protection and wealth and a good life. Naomi is taken care of, and Naomi maintains herself in the role of mother, of the elder, of the person who gives advice. Ruth is the daughter, so this principle is still in fact there. But in the end, I'm not quite sure that I really 100% buy that everything Ruth is doing is coming from a place of love. There is a lot of, as you said yesterday, cunning involved here that, you know, that's speculation.
Yeah, I mean, just to tone down a little bit the pimping, I agree with you to a certain degree. On the other hand, what I'm seeing here is, remember, Naomi is acting, having first seen that Boaz has shown interest. And perhaps what she's doing there is giving a little push to Boaz. In other words, she's saying, hey, show this guy you're interested. This is it, right? Of course, it's quite a dramatic show here that she's putting on in the threshing floor, right? But in a way, perhaps, why not see it like this, that Naomi has seen the interest. She wouldn't have done that otherwise, right? If there had been no interest and she's now pushing her daughter here, awaken his interest, right? She's not doing that. She notices there is interest, but then she realizes Boaz is never going to make a move because he's from my generation. He doesn't think it's appropriate to make a move with such a young woman. And so she says, here, go and give him a hint. Big hint. But go and give him. I'm seeing her more like giving a little push to Boaz, without taking away from of everything you're saying, the cunning, but I do want to give it a little silver lining, a little bit, tone it down, soften it around the edges a little bit, what you're saying. It's not all, ruthless and sugar daddy and, we're not. There is elements of attentiveness that he has shown interest, and Ruth is simply perhaps saying, or Naomi is helping Boaz take a step that he wants to take, right? But doesn't dare. And so she's saying, here, put yourself in that situation where he gets the hint. And it's scary for Ruth. You have to realize he might reject her. He might push her away and be like, what the hell, right? So this is really, this is pretty difficult for Ruth to do, right? Crystal Dulu, go ahead.
I mean, I will admit, like, my perspective is very father's house, so bear with me. But this seems like splitting hairs a little bit. Like, she has a fixed agenda. She needs to secure the future for herself and for Naomi. Like, this is bleeding very, very close to like the bad seduction.
Yes, except the agenda is, we will see, ends up being life-giving. Life comes out of this story, right? The seduction that ends in death, this is not it, right? Yeah, it's pretty dark the way they do it, but the ending kind of throws a happy shadow on the crazy stuff they're doing. The ending, this is why, by the way, everyone's turning a blind eye. I spoke of this already. Everybody's looking away. Nobody's judging. Why? Because they're seeing there's a deeper thing going on. Yeah, it's all messed up the way they do it. But in the end, it's life-giving, which is, again, typical mother's house, right? The crooked ways can end up to the right place. This is the key of the mother's house. Write this down. The mother's house really believes this, that to walk in crooked lines brings you to the same destination as those who walk the straight line. You can get there in crooked lines. And Ruth and Naomi, yes, I agree, they are crooked, right? But somehow there's something deeper going on, perhaps the invisible hand, right? And in the end, their crookedness leads to something, to the birth of King David. There's no higher honor, right? So this is very typically mother's house, how the crookedness of people and the way that we sometimes stumble around and don't do things quite clearly, and we're hustling and we make mistakes and we fall over here and we lie and cheat over there. And in the end, somehow, through the workings of the invisible hand, we are brought to the destination because our heart was in the right place, perhaps, right? Does that help a little bit, Crystal Dulu, with entering this craziness? Okay, very good. Okay, now let me, sorry. Anderson is looking for a husband so crooked. Yeah, good point, Anderson. Very good. You're right. What she's looking for is something very beautiful, actually. She's not looking to cheat, to cheat with him on his wife or what. This is not, there's no sin here. There's trespassing, but there's no sin again, right? We are not in the sin situation scenario. Good. All right, so let's go a little further now to spread your wing, for you are a redeemer. So I love this moment with Ruth. This is the moment where she really shines out in her agency. We talked about this already. So Naomi had told her, watch how she changes the script, right? Naomi had told her, just lie there and he'll tell you what to do. Patriarchy, right? She's lying there and he's like, doesn't know what to say. He's like, who are you? Right? And so then she speaks, and this is very typical in the Hebrew Bible, right? The woman begins to speak. You know that this is a key moment, turning point for the man, right? Who knows how to listen. And here she merges, right? She says, very interesting. She says, spread your wing over me. So let's talk about this a little bit. What does she say? Spread your wing over me. First, two things are going on. First of all, she's spread your wing over me, technical term for marry me. when we say spread your, usually it's not the wing, but it's spread your coat over me or spread your garment over me. The technical expression in the Hebrew Bible for marriage is spread your garment over me. In other words, take your coat and shield me with it, right? This is a metaphorical language for marriage. So what she's doing here is proposing to him. Now notice, she doesn't say spread your garment. She says spread your wing. What is she referring to? We mentioned this earlier. Something he said. What was it he said? Anybody remember? With wing in it. Anybody remember Boaz talking to her with using the expression of spreading the wing? Nobody. I even talked about this earlier. How is no one not remembering?
He said to her, "May God take you under His wings."
You're muted. You're muted.
Oh, can you hear
You're
me?
muted. You're talking, but you're muted.
Okay. Is there
I
something
hear
I
her.
can help you with?
I can hear her. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can
Oh,
hear.
well.
I can hear you, Janapla. But I can't.
It's
I can't.
okay.
I can't hear you, Professor. I think we lost you, Professor. Now we can hear you.
Oh, good. You heard me swear and everything? We're in New York, guys. This is how we talk. Okay, great. So who was talking? Who was trying to respond to my question?
Eleni was, I think.
Yeah, Brula, go ahead. Or
He said to her, "May God take you under His wings," or something to that
yes,
extent.
thank you. Someone remembers. Okay, great. Yes, when he first met her, he said, "May God protect you and take you under His wings." And now she's throwing it back at him. Do you realize the audacity of this woman? This is not some passive, submissive country girl. This is a woman who is so audacious that she throws back at him the blessing he did with her, basically telling him, put your actions where your mouth is. Basically what she's saying. Oh, you're all mouth. Oh, may God protect you. Here, put your actions where your mouth is. Right? That's basically what she's saying. But of course, she's saying it very well, right? She's not sounding like me right now. So this is very, very audacious. I mean, anyone can hear that she is really, she's really crossing every single line that exists for women and foreigners in this statement. She's really speaking to him like an equal. And so this is very interesting. So that's the first thing I'm noticing, right, is I hope you're noticing the personality that is coming through there, right? Because up until now, we couldn't tell. She was over here gleaming all day long, right? We don't know what kind of woman she is. But now just in those words, you can sense powerful personality who has the chutzpah, the balls, right? She has the balls to say this to him, right? All the while she says it in a certain way, and that's what I want to stop on a little bit, right? First of all, I absolutely love the way that she is able to express one of her deepest desires, right? To be basically not even saying I would love to be married. She's saying spread. This is the imperative. This is like she's using imperative form. Spread your wings. I mean, this woman is basically calling this man to action, right? And so my question, right? And I'm gonna look right now how she says it because it really moves him. So I mean, she's at the same time very, very much ballsy in her command. That's what it is. It's a command. But at the same time, there is a way that she speaks it that I want to stop on. And maybe here I will be answering Butterfield as to how to speak, right? Certain things. It doesn't mean you tone down on what you have to say. Here, she's clearly not toning down. But there is a way she's saying. And I think all of us can really learn, especially women, how to speak. And I'm going to go and do a commentary on that, right? This is me expounding on this, so bear with me, because I was intrigued, right? What can I learn here as to how to communicate my feelings, you know, in a way that will make the man say, I will do for you all that you ask. This is like music to my ears, really? Right? So, all right. So here's 4 things I want you to keep in mind. So this is especially for the women. So, and then we'll turn to the men after the break. Before I do that, Rudolph, do you have a comment?
Well, to what you just said, if communication is put into simple words, not mincing one's words, if a woman is capable of saying something objectively without unnecessary oppressing feelings attached to it, and just simply can speak her mind and appealing to the logical mind of a man, communication, and I'm speaking about just myself, fellas, so you can chime in and tell me what you think about it, but if I meet women who logically explain what it is that they want, and without much unnecessary emotion make a logical point, I can digest this information much easier than if it is cloaked in some sort of story or the usual traditionally way women are painted as being dramatic, which you are not. I'm here to say that I'm not saying that any woman is dramatic, but oftentimes they are painted in the light of being overly dramatic and unlogical, illogical.
Okay,
So
great. I'm going to do this. I'm going to ask all of you to tell me how she spoke, and then maybe I'll put it together. So I'm loving what you said, but I want to analyze a little bit what you meant. This was interesting. This is helping me a lot. What did you mean by oppressing feeling? So does this mean that when a woman expresses what she has to express with drama, it shuts the man down?
No, it is what women have been taught for centuries. What women were not allowed to do. Women were oppressed and were not allowed in many social circumstances and many cultures to equally express themselves to men. That patriarchal world has been around for thousands of years. We got that, we understand that. Now in our modern world, it's the same guys. The guys haven't changed. But what has happened is that women have finally come to the conclusion that it is actually a very positive thing to speak up. Look how she is doing it. She is not saying, please, please, please take me. She's saying, hey, dude, cover me, and cover me with your cloak or coat or whatever it is. But what it means is, you, pal, cover me. Come on, let's go. I'm here to do this with you.
So I'm loving what you're saying, because it goes to Butterfield's point that why can't we just speak, right? And here Ruth is just speaking. There's no manipulation, there's no drama, there's no tears, right? No supplication, no attitude, no anger, right? She's just speaking, right? So she doesn't need to go through all those other channels of emotionality or whatever, right? So very nice. So yes, I think I agree with you. She's, and this is helping me. I hadn't quite seen that sometimes just speaking very clearly without the way you put it is interesting, the oppressing feeling, without, without the, I mean, not that feeling is bad, right? Maybe I would need to hear some women on that.
But without being the victim of that oppression, if you can call it oppression, without acting as the victim of this oppression.
Okay, all right. So
if you recognize that there is oppression happening, and you say, I'm not going to do that anymore, so screw it, I'm just going to say it the way it is.
Okay, I like that.
Be aware that the consequences are going to come back to you the same way you put it out there. But Ruth, in her case, is ready to do that. You said that earlier. She's putting it all on the line here. It's a big moment where she's saying, I got to do this, or I'm going to be screwed here.
So what would be wrong with her saying it, with emotion? Just for the sake of the inquiry. What is it with emotion which you seem to be saying is not a good thing, or at least that's what I'm understanding? And then Butterfield, I'm coming to you.
It would be much less powerful of a statement if it would be minimized by an emotion, because it would mean that please, please, please do that.
Okay.
Or oh, I need you, I want this to happen right now.
Okay. Yes.
You know, if you, and that's what why
Pressure.
the term,
Pressure.
exactly, it's why I use the term objectively. This is a, you know, even though it is in the heat of the moment, this is a very cold conversation. It's a very straightforward kind of thing.
Very nice. I love it. Okay, Butterfield, please respond.
I mean, I will just first of all say I think that we are making a lot of assumptions about a story that we have. We have one chapter of the Bible. We don't know that there wasn't emotion involved. We don't know the inflection. And I also think that we're kind of reducing the word emotion to just talk about crying or pleading or something like that. I mean, I could say these exact same things about men and say it would mean nothing if he was acting angry and if he was acting dominant. That would take everything out of it because he's just acting like a man does. And so I think that using the word emotion is a bit too broad. And I understand what we're saying about not bringing up oppression or acting victimized, but if Ruth was feeling victimized, I don't know why it would undo anything she does or says to bring that up or to mention that, because even though Ruth is a strong character in these chapters in her story, she still is doing exactly, I mean, not exactly, but all she is allowed to do in this patriarchal society, and she is still conforming to the gender norm. She's not saying, I don't want to get married, please give things to me, please do this for me just because I feel bad for myself. She's still acting within what's expected of her. And so I don't know, I guess I just don't necessarily agree with what we're saying. And especially if we're trying to apply it outside of Ruth's situation to broader lessons that we can get from this. It doesn't, seems like we're speaking a little bit narrowly about the story and kind of making a lot of assumptions, like I said before.
Okay, I love what you said, that Ruth probably had, that maybe Ruth had emotion, right? And I think it's actually closer to the biblical characters to have emotion when they're speaking, right? So certainly Ruth's voice probably had emotional quality or whatever. But to Rudolph's point, I think he's making an interesting point from the male perspective, right? If we are to understand that world, I think it's interesting to see how they react to certain emotions, right? And what I think what Rudolph is saying, which I find interesting, is that some emotions are interpreted by men as being manipulative. Now, it doesn't mean we mean them like that, right? But they can, and sometimes we do. I mean, honestly, we have a way. I don't know if you've seen, oh my God, it's so funny. Do you know these two Black comedians, the one who used to imitate Obama? What are they called? Peel and something.
Key and Peele.
Yeah. And so they have a moment where this woman is breaking up with this guy and he's playing the woman, right? Watch this. I'll send it to you if you want, if you email me. And she's really using the emotions to reel him back in, right? So emotions can be at least used or perceived as a way of manipulating. But this doesn't mean that Ruth had no emotion. There are emotions that are perfectly just a genuine expression of how you're feeling, right? So I think I see what Rudolph is saying.
I would say that seducing Boaz is the greatest manipulation she could have done. So I don't know why emotions would possibly be the issue in the situation when she approached him drunk and undressed him.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think that crying or saying that she had come across hardship in her life because she was a woman would have been the tipping point in this situation of how she was interacting with him across gender lines.
Especially since we don't really have too much information, like you're saying in the text, about how she spoke these words. But it is nice what we can notice is how straightforward and clear she is and to the point. And this is something we women often struggle with, right? We're afraid to say the thing because we're afraid it might be too much for the guy to hear. And here we're learning that, hey, it's okay to do that in as much as you speak it in a certain way, which I need to get to eventually. But I want to first hear some of you. Bernard and then Olivera.
I guess the way I kind of took all of like your opinions and the context is like you have to like kind of tailor how you speak to get your point across sometimes. Like even teachers have to find different ways to get things across to their students, you know? So I guess I didn't really take this sort of as a back and forth between man and woman. I just kind of took it as, you know, finding the best way to get your point across in whatever way that is. Yeah, I mean, until all of this, I didn't really take it so much as she's trying to get it because men don't understand women, and that's just like the general underlying tone. I just took it as, you know, like personally for me, if someone starts yelling at me and getting loud with me, I'm not gonna receive what they're saying as well. Like that's just not gonna get across to me. So I need you to find a different way to like get things, you know, so that I actually can retain it and we can have like a conversation that's actually productive. So I guess that's kind of the way I looked at it.
Yeah, I think that's the direction I'm heading in, right? We women have learned to speak, but we haven't learned to modulate our voices. Now, I know this is annoying to all of us who are feminists, right? For me to say things like that. But I feel like we need to go further. This is really why I'm so obsessed by seeing how she's talking. I do feel like we've made huge progress by learning to even utter something. But the way we have been speaking to the men's, I'm talking about feminist basic speech, which is usually pretty straightforward, pretty angry, pretty in your face very often, right? And so I'm saying we need to now learn how to speak so we can be heard. And this is why I'm reading this text in this way, in a kind of a post-feminist, maybe beyond feminism, right? Walking in the line of feminism, but trying to go further to really learn now as women how we can modulate our voices so what we have to say can be better received. Because to be honest, if you go to most of the world and you bring up even the word feminism, everybody shuts down. I've seen it, right? I've taught in different countries which are non-Western, and feminism is like, it spooks people. So this tells me, right, that there's still some work to do as far as modulating what we have to say so that we can be heard. In our societies, which are much less patriarchal, it's easier. But if you go to other societies, which are still very patriarchal, it's very important to learn to modulate the voice so you can actually be heard. Okay, Olivera, and then we continue. But this is a great discussion. I love it. Olivera, go ahead.
Okay, so much has been said, and I had so much to say, and then now I'm kind of, I agree with Bernard, but I find my challenge listening to this is I took this class before, so I am here for the second time fighting to understand how to all of this, and my challenge is like there is the man, and the man would be better off if the woman modulated. So everything is catered to him, and then the woman is is always on this position of trying to go around and find their has to change in order to address to the man. And then this is what my challenge is. You just mentioned the feminism is like a world that scare people off, and then like I challenge us to think why, because if on the same context we can say on there is other words that frighten people, maybe like a racism on a room of like a white people will be like a challenge world, but it's really because the word is the problem, or it's like how we are, how the problem is, like how the word challenge the reality is the problem. And then I think we have to think like there is a problem here, and then the word is the problem, or is the other way around, I don't know if I made myself.
I know, you made total sense. Yes. I mean, people are scared of feminism, first of all, because they're scared of having another person, other emerge in their world. For sure. There is this element of, we don't want the woman to emerge, right? And become as powerful as us, because this will undermine our authority, right? This is in the mind of many people. So yes, the challenge of feminism, why people are spooked by feminism, is first and foremost, because feminism is female empowerment, and many people are not ready for that, right? But what I want to do is go a step further, right? Let us be empowered, but in partnership with the man rather than against the man. Has always been my discourse, right? We need to learn to walk towards empowerment with the men in our lives rather than against the men in our lives. And for this, we need to learn to speak.
And the men must give up the hierarchy, the place
Yes,
of
that's
you.
true.
It's not, because if only you say there is just a change, it's not only necessary that the woman do the change. It's not, both has to work together, and then the woman has to move and the man has to move. And I find my challenge with this discourse is like, if the woman change, then things will be different. It's not. It's like the two people has to work together. Men and woman work together toward change. It's not only the woman modulating that tone that's going to make some difference.
Yeah, I mean, which we're not there yet, but as I told you, right, the men also need to learn to listen, and we're going to talk about that. So yes, it's a partnership in the sense that we have something to do with our voice and they have something to do with their ears, right? So yes, we'll get to that. Okay, let me continue because I want to take a break and I want you to hear these 4 points and maybe you will see more clearly what I've been talking about. So here's what I'm getting from how she's talking, right? These are the lessons that I got. So number one, it's not a complaint, right? So first, she's not coming to him and saying, right, well, I would think you would have by now figured out that we're in poverty and moved your finger about it. Like, right, she doesn't come up to him and say, right, didn't you notice that we're poor and here you are super wealthy and can't you move it, right? It's not a complaint, right? So first of all, what she's doing is she's not harping on his defects, and they are there. I mean, it's true. Look at Boaz, very wealthy. He's the family of Naomi. Does he move one finger to help her? No, right? This is very strange. Normally, right, you see a poor family member, you would act quickly and try to help them. He doesn't do anything to help them. Only when Ruth appears on the scene does he begin to be set in motion. So in a way, so she's not complaining. She's on the contrary, highlighting his potential for the good. She's not saying, right, how come you haven't been helping us? She's saying, you are the Redeemer, right? So she's honing in on his strengths rather than on his weaknesses. So lesson number one that I'm getting from this passage, when you are confronting a man, right, as a woman, it will be much more beneficial to what you're trying to accomplish, to hone in on the strengths of the man rather than on the weaknesses. If you come to a man, for example, let's say the man hasn't been paying child support. I don't know, let's imagine that case, right? You have child, he hasn't been paying, and you need to confront him so he can pay. It will not help. I can predict this conversation. It will not help to start the conversation by saying, yeah, you really are a terrible provider. I really can't believe you have left us like this. You do this, the guy is finished. Whereas if you start and you say, look, I appreciate the way you've been providing so far, even if it's like $1 a month, and I would love a little more help, right? So this is the first way to modulate the request. And we too often become overly critical. And when you approach somebody critically, especially anybody, man or woman, this is the best way to shut them down, right? And so very often when we confront a man, we confront the man critically rather than starting with the strengths and building on the strengths, right? So that's the first thing I'm seeing here that I think is interesting. And I see a couple things in the chat. Okay, I'm gonna stop this debate about
Sorry, my second question was about, one was from before, the second one was about what we just said, because I thought that Boaz had already helped her in chapter 2. So I was just wondering about that.
Yes, very good. So he has helped her and she's building on that, right? So in other words, she's not saying, this is really, you haven't been doing that much and we really need more here. She could have shown up on his doorstep and been like, yo, this is not sufficient, right? Don't you see that, right? So she bypasses the complaint she could have had, definitely. And she goes straight to the strength and saying, you have the power to help me, right? Instead of saying, you suck at this, now help me. If you say to somebody, you suck, and then you ask for help, no, I suck. You just said I sucked. This is all the man is hearing. I suck. Why should I help you? I can't. But if you say, you got this, then the man is like, oh, okay, I have the resources. Okay, now I can help, right? So that's the first thing I'm seeing that I think is interesting, right? Let's see a couple. Let me just finish the 4 and then we can have a little discussion. Second thing I'm seeing, she does not expect. I think this is one of the most beautiful moments, right? She says, spread your wing over me, for you are a redeemer. But she's not saying, yeah, you need to do this. This is your duty. This is, right? I am expecting this of you. You have to do this. I can't believe you haven't done it, right? It's imperative, but at the same time, she's asking this as it's interesting. It's both, she's calling him to his duty, but she's not expecting him to do his duty. She's saying it and then she stops talking. She's not continuing to nag and complain and try to force the thing. She's not forcing it. She says the duty and then she stops, instead of continuously saying, yeah, and it's your duty and this is why and here's why and blah, blah, blah. So there's a notion here that everything we ask is coming, nothing is due. I think we need to understand it like this. When you're asking another human being for something, no one owes us anything, right? Anything that we ask is always going to be a grace. And to remember that, to have the humility to remember that when you ask for something, you can never force a human being to give it to you. You always have to ask from a place of humility, because nobody owes us anything, right? Nobody owes us love. Nobody owes us, right? Even nothing, right? So in a way, I love the way that she's asking and then relinquishing control and not trying to push, right? It's beautiful. Related to this is the third thing, is the open-endedness. She asks and then she waits for him to act in his own time. And very often we ask and then we nag and we nag some more and we nag again and we nag so much that it backfires, right? So the ability to ask and then stop and wait for the man to fulfill the request in his own time and way, this is what she's doing. She goes back to Naomi and Naomi says, now you have to wait. He will do it, right? But you have to wait. So this is what I'm saying. She's combined, just in conclusion, I'm loving the way that she's combining this audacity, right? She's making a very strong request in the imperative form, but at the same time, she's asking this in a very profound stance of humility. And I think if we are able to combine the two as women, we will get very far, right? We need the two. There's two types of women in the world: those who are only humble and those who are only audacious, right? Only humble, always taking whatever crumbs is given to them. Whatever you give me, I will take gratefully. I am your dog, right? So that's one type of woman. Other type of woman, warrior princess, right? It's like, really? You're not going to give me this? Well, I'm done with you. I'm out of here. If you can't rise up to my expectations, we're finished, right? This is audacity. Both are good, but it's a combination of the two, which makes for extremely powerful results. If we can be audacious and raise the bar super high, but at the same time be super humble about it, I think this is the key. We are not capable of doing both yet, I think, in our state of evolution. We are either too humble, taking whatever comes our way, not asking for much, putting bar really low, taking whatever the guy is doing, or we're too high, taking nothing, and just setting the bar super high, which is great. But then if the guy doesn't reach that, we're done with this guy, miserable guy, right? This is what it means, again, to be ezer ke negdo. Remember when we talked about Genesis? This will be a test question, by the way. Ke means like, right? With. Neged means against, right? Confronting. And so what I love about Ruth is that she is combining ke, which is I'm with, I am not going to push. I'm going to ask in a state of humility, but at the same time, she's naked. She's audacious and puts the bar very, very high. And so that for me is what we can learn as women in terms of how to speak with men. We need to set the bar super high, be very clear, be audacious, aim for the impossible, but be humble about it. And I think this is the part that we have not yet learned to join the two. So hopefully it makes a little more sense. Now we can have maybe a little more balanced discussion, because this is what I was trying to say, that we need to talk and say what we have to say. But if we say it arrogantly or critically or aggressively or in a way that is demeaning to the other person, we're not going to be heard. So why are we speaking? Right? And so to blend the audacity with humility and compassion and generosity for the other person, I think is the way that we're going to be heard. Now, hopefully it's a little clearer for some of you. So Butterfield, how do you feel now? Are you a little better? And how does this sound to you?
I think that certainly makes sense. And I am more comfortable with that in terms of saying that everybody needs to do that, and that it's not just a women's issue, that women need to combine both. I think that that's where a lot of my issue has come from this conversation, that we keep saying it's something women need to do, and I think it's something everybody needs to do.
Okay, great. Yeah, so that clarifies. So I guess it's coming because we are studying in this text. I'm honing in on the woman, but obviously there are myriads of other texts which will tell, right, what you're saying. So in this text, my purpose was to figure out what can we as women learn. That's the purpose of the analysis I'm giving to the text, right? We can read the text 100 different ways, but I was seeking, how can me as a woman grow, right? And then we'll look at how can men grow too, right? So obviously the text is not saying, yes, women need to be, everybody, right? But I was thinking when I was studying the text, what can I learn and what can the women in my class learn? And of course, we can read other texts where everyone is asked to do that, obviously. The book of Proverbs, speaking like this, right? A lot of teachings on how to talk, right? For both men and women. But here, this is a focus here where I wanted to focus on the woman. And then, of course, separately on the man, which we'll get to after the break. So good. So I'm glad you're a little bit reconciled. Excellent. So let's see. Rudolph, Bernard, and Giannakopoulos.
Look, before I raised my hands, I had some other ideas that were already touched on right now. But I appreciate what you're saying, Hallie, because I object to the term humility or being humble, a woman to a man. Also, it's, in my view, it's not a matter of showing humility. It's not a matter of being the second class citizen in the conversation. If I can use my professional job for that, I manage people and processes. And in managing people and processes, I look for two things, and my teams have women and men in there. There are people who have extraordinary high intelligence, great skills, and no emotional intelligence, no soft skills. And what I would like to throw into this whole conversation is the fact that in addition to being objective and having the clarity of what the crux of the matter actually is, what you want to achieve in a conversation, how you want to communicate with anyone, in Ruth's case with a man, means that you have to be persuasive by using all your faculties, your incredible wit, your intellectual capacity, your soft skills, and your emotional intelligence. Hopefully, the male, the partner, has all of them too. If not, there's going to be a different conflict. But I am in full agreement with you that there is no reason why any woman should come from a position of humility and say, oh my God, I need to make this palatable so this poor man understands what I'm saying. There is a negative connotation in palatable as being, acceptable and satisfactory. Men are not the judge of what women do. but women are the judge of how they present what they want to do. So if you include as much into it as you possibly can, you have a much better platform of communication.
Okay, great. So emotional intelligence is what you're saying. I'm getting that from the text, right? Ruth, in a way, is showing a lot of emotional intelligence as well as goal-oriented. So nice, very nice response. Yes, and again, right, Butterfield is right. Obviously, emotional intelligence is a skill that both men and women need, right? In this context, of course, I focused on the woman, but of course, this is a, what's the word? A gendered skill, right? Okay, Giannakopoulos, go ahead.
So one thing I want to add is it's not so they can understand us. Like, so for women, the way they talk, or men, how we talk, it's not so we can get them to understand us, but so that we can actually get it so they can accept our points, right? So if we come at them without hostility, like I'll give an example. Let's say you're in a relationship with someone and you want more attention. If you come at them and say, hey, you haven't been paying attention to me enough and it's getting me really annoyed, obviously they're going to be really defensive and they're going to be like, what the heck are you talking about? I do as much as I can, I try whatever, right? But if you come at them and say, honey, I've kind of been feeling a little down recently, like I would really appreciate some more attention. That in a way, it's not like they don't understand the first way that you want more attention. It's that now you're making it so that they can actually receive what you're trying to say. So they won't be as defensive. They'll actually be more receptive and they'll say, okay, what can we do together? That's like a really big thing for relationships. And whether you're in a marriage, girlfriend, boyfriend, or just friends, that's just how you're supposed to talk to people. So they can actually receive what you're trying to tell them.
Good, yeah, that's the gist, right? You're showing exactly how, in a given situation, the way we communicate can create X or Y response, and you want the response to be good, right? Butterfield, go ahead.
Yeah, I actually just had obviously related to our class today, but not these past few comments. I just had a question, but just to quickly add on to that, that's what I was trying to say in the chat, like being palatable, versus being persuasive. Everybody needs to be persuasive and needs to talk to each other in a way that we can expect each other to be receptive. And I think that that's an important distinction to make. But I was just wondering when we were talking about the different points of what Ruth did well or did correctly when she was talking to Boaz, and we talked about how she wasn't just expecting him to do anything and she was calling on his duty but not demanding it. I don't know if we'll be getting to this at all in the second or the next part of class, but I was just wondering how with Boaz's role, the Redeemer Guardian title, and his kind of that societal and legal expectation to be looking out for people in his family, such as Ruth. I guess I was wondering, why Ruth had to initiate this, if that was the expectation for him with his role. And then also I was just wondering, would it have been wrong of her to have explicitly called on that role, since it's mentioned so many times in the passages?
Really good question. So you're bridging for the next part, but I'll answer briefly, right? So he had neither responsibility. We talked about this, right? He was not the closer one to buy the land. There was a closer relative, and he's not the brother of the deceased. So he has neither duty. So what Ruth is asking of him is not duty, it's to go beyond duty, right? And what's interesting is that he does so. So we'll talk about that. So yeah, so no, she couldn't go directly because he didn't have any responsibilities, right? But yet she's still giving him a beyond duty type of responsibility. And this is where Boaz is showing this is where his glory lies, is that he was able to go beyond the call of duty. And we'll talk about this, that in a way he wouldn't have if she hadn't pushed him. So we're going to talk here about not how just the man delivers the woman, right? We see how he can deliver her, but she also delivers him. And we're going to talk about that in the next section. So the next section, ladies, is going to be the guys' turn. So now you can be happy that it's going to be not just about us. And maybe next time I'll just talk with first the guys and then finish with the ladies, because I don't think we like to be told how to better ourselves. You know, in this day and age, you know, there's so much to be done on the other side, and I agree with you. So we will be talking about the guy now. And so we talked about how Ruth can teach us, you know, how to become a better woman. Boaz also can teach men how to become better men. So we'll be doing that in just a few minutes. So let's give ourselves 5 minutes. Let's start exactly at 5. I'm going to stop the recording, and we'll be back exactly at 5 for the guys' turn.